Jack Harding maneuvered through the bustling corridors of Nexus Station, an interstellar hub teeming with traders, adventurers, and diplomats from countless civilizations. The hum of alien languages filled the air, blending with the scent of exotic spices and the metallic tang of spacecraft fuel. As Jack adjusted his cargo jacket and checked his datapad for the day's schedule, his old friend and fellow human merchant, Carlos Mendez, greeted him with a hearty slap on the back. "Jack, made it through the asteroid fields without a scratch again. I see." Jack grinned. "You know me, always riding my luck. How's the market today?" "Livelier than a Gorgon banquet," Carlos replied, leading Jack towards a cafe draped in luminescent vines. "Got some new faces around, too. Might be worth your while." They ordered 2 steaming cups of Jara, a popular local brew, and settled into a corner booth. The cafe buzzed with the energy of a dozen worlds converging, a place where deals were struck and fortunes made. "So, who's the new interest?" Jack asked, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. Carlos nodded towards a booth across the room where a striking figure sat alone, her delicate features partially obscured by a flowing emerald cloak. "See that one? She's Zelthar. Rare for them to venture out this far. Heard she's selling artifacts from her world. Supposed to be quite the catch." Jack's interest peaked. The Zelthar were known for their elusive nature and their artistry, both highly valued in human sectors. "Worth an introduction, you think?" "Definitely, but they're not big on direct contact. You might want to ease into it. Maybe find a common ground first," Carlos advised. With a plan forming, Jack finished his drink and stood, smoothing his jacket. "Wish me luck," he said, heading towards the Zelthar woman's table. As he approached, the woman looked up, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the cafe in vibrant hues. "May I join you?" Jack asked, indicating the empty seat opposite her. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Please do." Jack sat down, offering his hand. "I'm Jack Harding. I trade in, well, a bit of everything. I couldn't help but notice you might have something interesting to share." The Zelthar woman's lips curled into a subtle smile. "I am Lyra, and yes, I bring offerings from Zeltha, artifacts and tales alike." Jack leaned in, intrigued. "I'm always interested in stories. Perhaps you could share one over dinner? I find that good company makes for better business." Lyra considered this, her gaze thoughtful. "That is an unusual approach for a human." "It's served me well so far," Jack replied with a chuckle. Their conversation flowed from trade to culture, each learning about the other's world. Lyra spoke of Zelthar's luminous forests and crystal lakes, while Jack regaled her with tales of Earth's oceans and mountains. As they talked, Carlos watched from a distance, pleased to see his friend making a connection. He knew that in the cosmos, relationships were as valuable as the rarest of minerals. With Jack and Lyra's budding partnership, new opportunities were bound to unfold for all involved. After their initial meeting, Jack arranged to meet Lyra at a popular venue on the station known for its blend of various interstellar cuisines. He invited Carlos to join them, hoping his friend's easy charm would help bridge any cultural gaps. Carlos greeted Lyra with a warm, respectful nod as they approached the restaurant. "Lyra, it's a pleasure to meet you. Jack here hasn't stopped talking about your artifacts." Lyra offered a slight smile, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "And I am curious to see if your enthusiasm for cultures matches his." The trio took their seats at a table with a view of the station's bustling center, a vast dome filled with floating holograms advertising goods from across the galaxy. Waiters, both human and robot, navigated through the tables with practiced ease. "So, Lyra," Carlos started as they looked over the digital menus. "Jack tells me you're from Zeltha. What brings you so far from home?" "I am here to explore potential markets for Zelthar crafts, and perhaps to understand more about human cultures," Lyra explained, her voice melodic yet reserved. "My people value knowledge of other worlds, though we rarely travel this far." Jack chimed in, eager to find common ground. "Humans are curious too. We thrive on learning about others, which is probably why we roam so much." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their order. A variety of dishes ranging from spicy Martian delicacies to serene Venusian seafood. Each dish was an art form, designed to appeal to the diverse clientele of the station. As they sampled the food, Lyra seemed to relax, her initial reserve giving way to a more open demeanor. "This is quite extraordinary," she commented, trying a bite of the seafood. "We have nothing like this on Zeltha." Carlos laughed. "Wait till you try the Martian spice. It's not for the faint-hearted." Lyra accepted the challenge, her expression brightening with surprise at the intensity of the flavors. "That is very lively," she managed, reaching for a drink. The meal passed with lively discussion about their respective worlds. Jack was particularly interested in Zelthar's art, asking Lyra detailed questions about the techniques and materials used. Lyra, in turn, was curious about human social structures and economies. "How do humans manage cooperation between so many diverse groups?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. Jack and Carlos exchanged looks. "Not always well," Jack admitted, "but we find ways to work together, mostly through trade and mutual interests. Sometimes it's messy, but it's how we progress." "Fascinating," Lyra mused. "Zelthar society values harmony above all. Your diversity is chaotic, yet vibrant." As dinner wound down, Jack proposed a visit to his ship, where he kept samples of goods and artifacts from his travels. "I'd love to show you some of the things I've collected," he offered. "Maybe you'll find something Zelthar could appreciate." Lyra accepted, intrigued. "I would like that very much. It is one thing to hear of other places, another to see their treasures with one's own eyes." Carlos grinned, clapping Jack on the back as they stood to leave. "Looks like you've made an impression, my friend." Walking back through the station, the corridors now lit by the soft glow of the artificial night cycle, Jack felt a stir of excitement. Sharing his world with Lyra, seeing her reactions, it all reminded him why he loved this life, connecting threads between stars, one meeting at a time. Jack led Lyra and Carlos through the narrow aisles of his cargo ship, the Venture. The air was filled with the mixed aromas of engine oil and the distant scent of sea salt, a souvenir from a planet covered in oceans. As they passed rows of neatly stacked crates, Jack shared stories of distant worlds and the peculiarities of their inhabitants. "Each of these crates has a story," he explained, tapping on one that vibrated slightly. "Like this one, it's from Calypso 3. Inside are singing stones. They hum when the moons align." Lyra leaned closer, fascinated. "Your life is filled with wonders," she remarked, her tone filled with genuine interest. "It's the diversity of the galaxy that keeps it interesting," Carlos added, pulling a small, intricately carved box from a shelf. "And every now and then, we find something that reminds us of home, no matter how strange it seems to others." He handed the box to Lyra, who examined the carvings with an expert eye. "This is Terran, isn't it? From your Earth?" "Yes," Jack nodded. "It's a puzzle box. The challenge is to open it without breaking the spell of its craftsmanship." With a few skilled twists, Lyra opened the box, revealing a small, gleaming gem inside. "Beautiful," she said, looking up at Jack with a smile. "Your people value cleverness and beauty alike." Jack beamed, proud and a little surprised. "Exactly. It's a reminder that sometimes the journey to solve a problem is as valuable as what we find at the end." Their tour continued into the control room, where the walls were lined with navigation charts and holographic displays of star systems. Lyra's eyes widened as she stepped closer to the maps, her fingers tracing the routes of common trade paths. "This is your domain," she observed, looking around at the high-tech equipment. Carlos chuckled, pulling up a chair. "Jack here can find his way through a black hole and come out with his hair still perfect." "It's annoying, really." Jack laughed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not always that smooth, but thank you, Carlos." Turning to Lyra, he invited her to sit at the navigator station. "Want to see where we're headed next?" As Lyra sat, Jack initiated the star map, which lit up the room with the light of 1,000 suns. Each point of light represents a star, a potential stop on our journey. Lyra's expression was one of awe. "It's incredible. You have the freedom to explore all these places." "It's freedom, yes, but it also comes with responsibility," Jack explained. "We make connections, establish trade, sometimes mediate disputes. our actions can influence the lives of many. Their discussion deepened into the ethics of interstellar trade and exploration. Lyra shared how the Zelthar manage their affairs, emphasizing community and collective well-being over individual gain. It seems we have much to learn from each other, Jack mused. Yes, and perhaps more to share, Lyra agreed. I'm beginning to see the value in forming stronger bonds with humans. As the artificial night deepened outside the ship, Carlos stood, stretching. I'll leave you two to close up here. Jack, don't forget we have that early trade meeting tomorrow with the Andorians. Got it, Jack nodded, then turned back to Lyra as Carlos exited. How about you? Any plans for tomorrow? Lyra stood, looking thoughtful. I believe I would like to spend more time here, if that's agreeable. I find your perspective enlightening. Jack's heart skipped a beat at her words. I'd like that. There's a lot more I'd love to show you about the ship, the trade routes, maybe even some of the planets if you're interested. I would be honored, Lyra said, her voice soft but sincere. As they headed back to the main deck, Jack felt a new sense of purpose. It wasn't just about trade anymore. It was about understanding, about building something lasting with someone from a world so different yet so intriguing. The following day, Jack invited Lyra to join him and Carlos on a visit to the cultural archives of Nexus Station. The archives were a treasure trove of galactic history and art, a place where one could spend hours lost in the stories of distant worlds. As they walked through the grand entrance, lined with sculptures from various civilizations, Jack pointed out a few highlights. This one's from the Cygnus cluster. They use these figures to commemorate their history. Each pose tells a different part of their story. Lyra was visibly impressed. Zelthar have similar traditions. Art is our history book, our voice. Carlos, ever the enthusiast for alien cultures, chimed in. You'll love the interactive section then. They got holographic reenactments of key historical events. It's pretty immersive. The trio made their way to the interactive section, where they donned lightweight visors and selected a program. The room transformed into a bustling market square of an ancient alien civilization, complete with sights, sounds, and even smells. As they walked through the holographic world, Lyra paused to touch a virtual artifact, her expression one of wonder. It feels so real, she said, her hand moving through the hologram. It's a great way to learn, Jack agreed. Seeing and experiencing history like this helps in understanding other cultures better. They spent the next few hours exploring different programs, each showcasing a different world. Between simulations, they discussed their own experiences and traditions. So Lyra, Carlos asked as they sat in the lounge area, taking a break. What's a common misconception about the Zelthar that you'd like to clear up? Lyra thought for a moment before responding. Many think we're secretive or aloof. In truth, we're just very community-focused. Our traditions require a level of intimacy and trust that we don't easily extend outside our own people. That makes sense, Jack said. Humans can be like that too, in our own way. Sometimes, our diversity makes us put up walls where there should be bridges. As the conversation flowed, Jack noticed how Lyra's initial reserve had given way to a more relaxed and open demeanor. He felt a connection growing, not just on a cultural level, but something more personal. Hey, why don't we take this discussion to the Zenith Lounge? Carlos suggested. It's got the best view of the station, and I'm buying. At the lounge, over drinks under the glowing lights of passing ships, Jack decided to delve deeper. Lyra, what brought you personally out here? It sounds like a big step for someone from a community-oriented culture. Lyra sipped her drink, her gaze fixed on the cosmic ballet outside. Curiosity mostly, and a desire to share Zelthar art with the galaxy. I want to create bridges, like you mentioned. Jack nodded, understanding her more with each word. It's brave, stepping out into the unknown like that. Makes me respect what you're doing even more. The evening wound down with the station's artificial sunset casting long shadows through the lounge. As they stood to leave, Lyra turned to Jack. Thank you for this day. I've learned a lot, not just about your cultures, but about you and Carlos as well. It was our pleasure, Carlos said, grinning. Anytime you want to dive into history or just enjoy good company, you know where to find us. Jack echoed his friend's sentiment. And I hope we can continue these exchanges. I think we've got a lot more to explore together. Lyra smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. I would like that very much. As they left the lounge, Jack felt a sense of accomplishment. He had not only shown Lyra a piece of his world, but had also taken a step closer to understanding hers. The bridge they were building was becoming sturdier with every shared experience. The next evening found Jack, Carlos, and Lyra at one of the lesser-known, yet locally adored, establishments on Nexus Station. The place was famed for its live performances, where artists from various worlds showcased their talents. Tonight was special. The lineup featured performers from rarely visited corners of the galaxy. As they settled into their seats, the lights dimmed, and a performer from the aquatic world of Delphine took the stage. The artist's movements were fluid, almost as if the stage were underwater. Lyra leaned over to Jack, her voice tinged with awe. It's beautiful how movement can convey so much across different cultures. Jack nodded in agreement, his eyes fixed on the stage. It's a universal language, just like art or music. Maybe even more direct. Between acts, while enjoying exotic snacks from a passing vendor, Carlos nudged Jack playfully. You've been quite the cultural ambassador, Jack. What's next on the itinerary? Jack, with a mischievous glint in his eye, turned to Lyra. Well, there's an old Earth tradition I know, daring someone to do something they wouldn't normally do. It's a fun way to learn about each other's limits and trusts. Lyra raised an eyebrow. Intrigued, I dare you say? I am familiar with the concept. Zelthar children play similar games. What do you propose? Jack thought for a moment, then smiled. I dare you to dance the next number with me. The band's about to play a lively tune, and it's a great chance to show off some human dance steps. Lyra laughed, a sound that drew a smile from Carlos. That's a challenge I accept. I hope you're prepared to keep up. As the band struck up a rhythmic beat, Jack and Lyra made their way to the small dance floor. The music was energetic, a pulsing melody that filled the room with vibrancy. Jack demonstrated a simple step-2-3 pattern, which Lyra picked up immediately, her movements graceful and precise. Carlos watched as his friends spun and laughed, their earlier conversations giving way to the unspoken dialogue of dance. He could see the connection between them strengthening, a mutual respect that was palpable even from a distance. As the song ended, they returned to their seats, breathless and laughing. Lyra turned to Jack, her eyes sparkling. I must admit, your dare was more enjoyable than I anticipated. Now it's my turn to propose a challenge. Jack nodded, still catching his breath. I'm ready. What do you have in mind? Lyra's smile turned playful. I dare you to try a Zelthar tradition. It involves reciting a poem while executing a series of precise gestures. It's a way we express our emotions artistically. Jack accepted the challenge with a nod. Lead the way, I'm all ears. Lyra spent the next few minutes teaching Jack the gestures and the words of the poem. The language was complex, the movements even more so, but Jack was a willing student. As he performed, stumbling over the unfamiliar words and gestures, Lyra and Carlos couldn't help but burst into laughter. Jack finished with a bow, grinning. I may need a few more lessons before I'm Zelthar poem ready. Lyra clapped, genuinely impressed. You did better than most would have. It's a difficult art form, even for us. Carlos raised his glass, a toast to the night, to daring and learning. May we always be as eager to embrace both. The trio spent the rest of the evening enjoying the performances, their conversation wandering through topics of art, culture, and the invisible threads that connected them all. It was a night of laughter, learning, and a deepening of the bond that had started as a simple business interaction but was quickly growing into something richer and more meaningful. Jack leaned back against the railing of the observation deck, watching the stars scatter their light across the endless black canvas of space. Lyra stood beside him, her shimmering cloak catching the faint glow of passing ships. Carlos had left them earlier, claiming he needed to prepare for the next day's trading, leaving the two alone for the first time in days. This station feels so vast, Lyra said, her voice quiet. And yet, when you look out there, it's just a speck in the grand scheme. Jack nodded, his gaze still on the stars. Perspective does that. Makes you feel small, but also connected to something bigger. Lyra turned to him, studying his profile. Do you always think so deeply, Jack Harding? Or is it the stars that bring it out of you? Jack chuckled, turning to meet her eyes. Maybe it's you. You have a way of making a guy think about things he normally wouldn't. She smiled softly, tilting her head. You flatter me, but I believe it is the other way around. I've seen more of the universe in these past days with you than in years of traveling alone. They fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the station a steady background to their thoughts. After a moment, Jack broke the quiet. I never asked what brought you to the Nexus specifically. You could have picked any trade hub. Why here? Lyra hesitated, her hands resting on the railing. I heard that humans often congregate here, and I wanted to understand them better. Your people are unpredictable, yet endlessly fascinating. Meeting you and Carlos has only confirmed that. Jack raised an eyebrow. Unpredictable? That sounds like a polite way of saying we're chaotic. Perhaps, Lyra admitted with a laugh. But in chaos, there's creativity, passion. It's something my people admire, but rarely embrace. Jack turned to face her fully. And you? Do you embrace it? She looked at him, her expression serious. I want to. That's why I'm here. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of her words hung between them, and Jack felt an urge to say something, to reach out and close the gap that had been slowly narrowing between them. He began, his tone lighter, there's another human tradition you might find interesting. It's called dancing under the stars. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, her curiosity piqued. And how does one accomplish this without gravity to anchor the steps? Jack held out a hand, a playful smile tugging at his lips. That's the beauty of it. You don't need perfect footing, just the right partner. Lyra hesitated for a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. Very well, show me this human custom. Jack led her to a clear section of the deck, the stars above serving as their silent audience. He hummed a tune, something soft and slow, guiding her in a simple sway. Lyra followed his movements, her initial stiffness giving way to a graceful flow. You're a natural, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Only because I have a patient teacher, Lyra replied, her gaze meeting his. As they moved, the space between them seemed to dissolve, their differences fading into the background. Jack could feel the warmth of her hand in his, the closeness of her presence, and he wondered if this moment could last forever. Lyra broke the silence, her voice tinged with something Jack couldn't quite place. Jack, do you believe it's possible for two people from such different worlds to truly understand one another? He stopped their slow dance, holding her gaze. I think understanding doesn't have to mean being the same. It's about meeting in the middle, finding common ground. And honestly, I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. Perhaps you're right. You humans are full of surprises. Jack laughed softly, resuming their gentle rhythm. Stick around, Lyra. You might find we have more in common than you think. The stars continued to watch as they danced, silent witnesses to the unspoken bond forming between two souls from worlds apart. Jack adjusted the control panel of the Venture, fine-tuning the ship's calibration as Carlos leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You've been unusually quiet this morning, Carlos remarked, watching Jack with a curious smirk. Is this about her? Jack shot him a glance, shaking his head, but unable to suppress a grin. Can a guy focus on his work without being interrogated? Sure, Carlos replied, pushing off the doorway. But when a guy keeps sneaking glances toward the observation deck, it's not about work. She's got you thinking, Jack. Before Jack could respond, the door to the deck slid open, and Lyra stepped in. Her presence immediately filled the room with a calm intensity. Am I interrupting something? She asked, tilting her head in curiosity. Not at all, Carlos said, flashing a grin. I was just pointing out that Jack here has been unusually contemplative. Care to share what's on your mind, Captain? Jack rolled his eyes but turned to Lyra, his expression softening. Actually, I was about to check out some trade data from the Andorian sector. Thought it might be useful for our next stop. Want to help? Lyra nodded, stepping closer. I'd like that. You've shown me much of human customs. It's time I return the favor. Carlos raised his hands in surrender. I'll leave you two to it. Call me if you need a translator for Andorian haggling. As Carlos left, Jack pulled up a holographic display, projecting charts and graphs of trade activity. Lyra studied the patterns, her sharp eyes quickly picking up details. This influx here, she pointed out, tracing a glowing line. It indicates a cultural event, likely a festival. Such events usually demand luxury goods and art. It would be an ideal time to introduce Zelthar crafts. Jack leaned in impressed. You got an eye for this. Makes me wonder why you haven't run your own trade routes before. Lyra glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. Because I was told it wasn't my place. Zelthar society is traditional. Roles are defined early, and deviation is often discouraged. Jack frowned. That sounds stifling. You got a mind for strategy. You'd thrive in this line of work. Lyra hesitated, then spoke softly. Perhaps that's why I left. I needed to see if I could thrive beyond those confines. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're doing more than thriving, Lyra. You got insight most traders would kill for. Her gaze met his, gratitude flickering in her expression. And you've given me the space to explore it. For that, I'm grateful. They worked side by side for the next hour, analyzing data and discussing strategies. Jack found himself increasingly drawn to Lyra's sharp mind and the quiet strength she exuded. As they wrapped up, Jack leaned back in his chair. You could make this a regular thing. I mean, if you're interested, there's always room for a partner on the venture. Lyra's expression softened, her voice almost a whisper. Are you certain? Our worlds are so different. Would such a partnership work? Jack's smile was easy, confident. I think we've proven we can handle differences. Besides, I can't think of anyone I'd rather have by my side. For a moment, Lyra said nothing, her gaze steady on his. Then she nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking across her face. Then let's see where this path leads us. Jack Harding. Their partnership was no longer a question of trade or convenience. It was a shared journey, one they both felt ready to embrace. Jack stood in the cargo bay of the venture, inspecting the crates of Zelthar artifacts that Lyra had brought aboard. Each piece was intricately designed, a reflection of her people's artistry. Lyra appeared beside him, her expression calm but tinged with anticipation. They're beautiful, Jack said, running his hand along the smooth edge of a carved sculpture. Your people really know how to create something timeless. Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying his face. You think they'll resonate with humans? That they'll understand their meaning? Jack turned to her, a warm smile on his face. Humans may not get all the cultural nuances, but beauty has a universal language. These will be a hit, no doubt about it. Carlos entered the cargo bay, wiping his hands on a rag. I just finished tuning up the landing thrusters. We'll be docking at the Andorian hub soon. Ready to charm some traders, Jack? Jack grinned. With Lyra's artifacts? This is going to be the easiest deal we've ever made. Lyra raised an eyebrow, her tone playful. Confidence is admirable, but let's hope it's not misplaced. Carlos laughed. You haven't seen Jack in action yet. The man could sell a sun lamp to a desert dweller. As the three of them made their way to the bridge, the venture slipped into the docking sequence, the Andorian trade hub growing larger on the display. The hub was a sprawling structure of domed markets and sleek towers, buzzing with activity. Here we go, Jack said, adjusting his jacket. Carlos, you handle the logistics. Lyra and I will meet with the merchants. Carlos saluted with mock seriousness. Aye, Captain. Walking side by side, Jack and Lyra entered the vibrant marketplace. The air was filled with the hum of chatter and the occasional melody from street performers. Jack guided Lyra to a prominent stall, where a seasoned Andorian merchant greeted them with a wide grin. Jack Harding, the merchant exclaimed. Back so soon? And with a companion this time. This is Lyra, Jack introduced. She's brought something special, Zelthar artifacts. I think you'll find them as fascinating as I do. The merchant's eyes widened as Lyra unveiled a few pieces. These are extraordinary. Zelthar craftsmanship is rare in these parts. What are you asking for them? Lyra glanced at Jack, who gave her a reassuring nod. She stepped forward, her voice steady. These are not just items. They carry the spirit of Zelthar culture. I'm asking for a fair trade that reflects their value, not only in credits, but in the opportunity to share our story. The merchant stroked his chin, clearly impressed. You drive a hard bargain. I respect that. Let's talk numbers. As the negotiation unfolded, Jack watched with pride. Lyra handled herself with poise and conviction, her presence commanding respect. When the deal was finalized, the merchant extended a hand. It's a pleasure doing business with you, he said. I look forward to seeing more of your work. Walking back to the ship with lighter crates and fuller pockets, Jack turned to Lyra. You were incredible back there. She smiled, a rare softness in her expression. I had a good teacher. Carlos met them at the cargo bay, grinning as he saw the results. Looks like a job well done. Drinks are on me tonight. Later, as the venture prepared to launch, Lyra stood on the observation deck, gazing at the Andorian hub shrinking into the distance. Jack joined her, leaning against the railing. We make a good team, he said quietly. Lyra turned to him, her voice just as soft. Yes, we do. I wasn't sure what I'd find when I left Zeltha. But now, I feel like I've found a path worth following. Jack reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. It's only the beginning, Lyra. We got a whole galaxy ahead of us. Their hands intertwined, and for a moment, the vastness of space seemed a little smaller, a little less daunting. Together, they faced the stars, ready for whatever came next.